Hello again and welcome to the program. I am Suren. Here is an intriguing question. Can we consider ourselves alive when there is no consciousness and no awareness? No awareness? No bodily feelings whatsoever? Some people experience consciousness when they are anesthetized and are on an operating table in the hospital. Can we consider it as being alive? And yet, the doctors perform a surgery upon the sleeping body of the individual who is being put into that temporary sleep, does not feel the operation being performed on him or her, as in a procedure of appendix removal or a childbirth. And yet, we hear often people claiming to be aware of things as they observe the whole experience while they are being operated on. To make it very clear, we are talking about out-of-the-body, OBE, or near-death experiences, NDEs. If it is not a hallucination, but real, how can that awareness be considered as being alive? Aliveness can be considered only when the consciousness is within the body, or, in fact, within the brain of the person. Remember, our scientists tell us that once your brain is no longer functional, it is not conscious. Then, how can we explain this phenomenon when people claim they are outside their body and that they are able to observe the entire process? Are they really exterior used with their consciousness? So what is the connection then with the person experiencing this outside consciousness as their own reality during that period of time? And they are certainly not taking their physical brain mass with themselves. How can this be explained? Are they hallucinating, dreaming perhaps, when being aware, able to watch from a higher place within the theater wherein the operation is taking place? How does that separateness be felt when the brain is not conscious? Let us talk about the human consciousness, particularly about its multifaceted aspects. Multifaceted human consciousness refers to the complex, multidimensional nature of our awareness, which is not a single entity, but a collection of various states and components, including arousal and awareness, self-consciousness, different psychological capacities, and experiences across normal and altered states, all shaped by internal and external factors like biology and culture. What are the key aspects of consciousness? Firstly, we need to concentrate on the dimensions. Consciousness can be understood as a phenomenon with different dimensions, such as the state of consciousness, wakefulness, sleep, and content of consciousness, like awareness, thoughts, feelings. Self-consciousness involves more than just self-awareness. It includes self-detection, self-monitoring, the ability to recognize oneself, any other capacity for self-knowledge. normal versus altered states of consciousness. Our ordinary experiences are just one part of a much broader spectrum of consciousness that also includes altered states, like those achieved through meditation, psychedelics, or sleep, which can lead to profound shifts in perception and self-awareness. Internal and external influences on consciousness. Biological factors such as brain states or states of the brain, and external factors such as cultural contexts both play significant roles in shaping the nature and experience of consciousness. Components of consciousness. To start, consciousness is not monolithic, but can be viewed as consisting of independent parts, like parallel tracks in a recording, on a recording tape, for instance. However, we need to consider the multiple levels of processing. We need to be aware of this. Consciousness involves both conscious or aware and unconscious processing, also with different levels of depth in influencing what is experienced or what remains below the threshold of awareness. What about integration and unity? Well, composed of different parts, consciousness also involves a sense of unity, where experiences are integrated into a larger unified structure of representation. Tell us about the implications. Okay? Interdisciplinary study. The multi-nature of consciousness means it is studied by diverse fields, including the sciences and humanities, leading to reach a dialogue, but also having the potential for misunderstandings. Yeah. Modulation. Understanding these facets could lead to a number of ways to modulate consciousness for therapeutic, recreational, or knowledge-gathering purposes, and even to extend or create beyond the human consciousness. Adam Sommer wrote a few years ago explaining what consciousness is. Therein he explained the following. The concept of consciousness is multifaceted and steeped in cultural and collective history. This paper additionally states that it explores its complexities by way of a series of contrasts. A. State of consciousness, such as wakefulness and sleep, contrasting with awareness, a term that picks out the content of consciousness, which range across all our psychological capabilities and capacities. B. Consciousness is in contrast to self-consciousness, which in itself is a complex term and can be described as embracing self-detection, self-monitoring, self-recognition theory of the mind, and self-knowledge. C. Though the narrow and broad senses of consciousness are contrasted, the former requires mature human awareness, capable of guiding action and self-report. The latter involving the much broader capacity to acquire and exploit knowledge. D. While inner conception of consciousness, by which awareness is essentially remains private and beyond the reach of scientific scrutiny, is extremely contrasted with outer conception, which allows that consciousness is linked with capacities for intelligent behavior. And finally, E. Easy and hard questions of consciousness are distinguished. The former involving the underlying neurobiology of wakefulness, awareness, and the latter, the allegedly more mysterious process by which biological processes generate the experience. The question of whether this final distinction is valid appears questionable. It is the focus of current debate. Varied interests converge on the study of consciousness from the sciences and humanities, alas, creating a scope for interdisciplinary misunderstandings, but also for a fruitful dialogue, as being spoken of previously. If familiar with, in the New Roba, we discover the following. Human consciousness, that enigmatic and multifaceted quality of awareness, is influenced by a media of factors, both internal and external. While traditional studies in cognitive science and neuroscience have primarily focused on the biological foundations of consciousness, a growing body of research is now also exploring the powerful role of it in the cultural context, which is shaping how individuals experience and interpret their consciousness. At New Roba, the community seems dedicated to understanding the intersection of cultural factors and neurobiology, recognizing that consciousness is not only a product of neural activity, but also a dynamic process shaped by cultural beliefs, practices, and social norms. What is the neuroscientific basis? Good question. It is crucial to understand the scientific foundations of consciousness itself. Neuroscientists have long debated the origins and mechanisms of conscious experience, with theories ranging from the global workspace theory to integrated information theory. Consciousness involves the integration of information across various regions of the brain, enabling the individual to have a unified experience of self and the environment. Regions such as the prefrontal cortex, parietal cortex, and thalamus are essential in the process of conscious awareness. These areas work in tandem to process the sensory input, engaging a higher order cognitive functions like decision-making, self-reflecting, and integrating past experiences with current stimuli to form an ongoing narrative of the self. However, despite this biological framework, consciousness is not a static or universal experience. It is deeply influenced by the context in which an individual exists. This context, including the cultural environment, has a profound effect on how consciousness is shaped, perceived, and of course, expressed. Culture is certainly a shaper of consciousnesses. Culture encompasses the shared values, beliefs, practices, and experiences which define a particular social group. It is through the culture that individuals learn to navigate the world while developing a sense of self and understanding their place in the society. As such, culture posits a critical role in shaping not only an individual's cognition, but also the very experience of consciousness. The concept of consciousness is not universally defined, perhaps not even definable. While Western philosophical traditions tend to view consciousness as an individual, introspective experience, many non-Western cultures understand it as a communal or relational process. In cultures such as those in Eastern Asia, Africa, and indigenous societies, the concept of the self is often viewed as interconnected with a collective and the environment. In these contexts, it remains self-contained phenomenon, but rather as a fluid, relational state that is shaped by social interactions, spiritual practices, and the natural world. Cultural variations in self-perception and awareness. Well, one of the most significant ways in which the culture influences consciousness is through the development of self-perception and self-awareness. The self-concept. The mental image the individuals have of themselves is shaped by the cultural environment in which they are raised. And in individualistic cultures, such as those predominant in many Western societies, however, the self is often viewed as autonomous, independent, and distinct from others. This perspective emphasizes self-identity, personal achievement, and the pursuit of individual goals. As a result, individuals in such cultures may be more likely to experience the unconsciousness as an internal, self-directed process, with a focus on personal thoughts, emotions, and desires. In collectivist cultures, such as those common in many parts of Asia, Latin America, and Africa, the self is often seen as interconnected with others. The emphasis is placed on relationships, social harmony, and group identity. In these societies, individuals may experience their consciousness as more relational, where the sense of self is shaped by family, community, and societal roles. This interconnectedness influences the way individuals experience emotions, morality, and even self-reflection. For instance, in collectivist cultures, introspection may be directed more towards how one's actions impact the group, rather than individual desires or achievements. The role of language, on the other hand, in shaping consciousness cannot be ignored. Language is another crucial element in the cultural context that shape human consciousness. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, also known as linguistic relativity, posits that the structure of a language can influence the way it speaks, thinks, and perceives the world. In other words, the language we use not only reflects our thoughts, but also shapes the very nature of our consciousness. Now, for example, some languages, particularly those in indigenous cultures, have multiple words for different types of emotions or relationships, allowing individuals to perceive and experience these phenomena with greater and specific nuances. In contrast, the languages such as English tend to have fewer distinctions, which can result in a more generalized experience of emotion or identity. In grammatical structure of a language can also influence how the individuals conceptualized time, space, and the self. For instance, in cultures with languages that emphasize the communal nature of experience, such as using plural pronouns or verb forms which indicate collective participation, wherein individuals may experience their consciousness as more interconnected with others, rather than as isolated or independent. Cultural practices and altered states of consciousness. Beyond the language and self-concept, consciousness is shaped. These cultural practices can induce higher states of consciousness that further illuminate the malleable nature of human awareness. Meditation, shamanic rituals, and religious ceremonies are just a few examples of culturally ingrained practices that can profoundly alter the individual's experience of reality. In many Eastern traditions, practices such as mindfulness meditations and yoga are designed to cultivate higher states of awareness and consciousness. These practices encourage individuals to step outside their usual self-differential modes of thought and engage in a more expansive, holistic experience of the present moment. Neuroscientific research has shown that such practices can lead to neuroplastic changes in the brain, enhancing areas associated with attention, emotional regulation, and empathy. These cultural practices, therefore, not only alter the individual's perception of self and the world, but also contribute to long-term changes in the brain's neural architecture. In cultures with strong spiritual and religious traditions, rituals involving psychoactive substances, dance, or chanting can lead to profound shifts in consciousness. These altered states are often framed within a cultural context that provides meaning, explanation, and a sense of connection to a greater whole. The impact of such practices, unconsciousness, is not only biological, but also deeply cultural, as individuals interpret and integrate these experiences according to the beliefs and values of their society. What about the interaction between neurobiology and culture? Here we are exploring the intricate relationship between neurobiology and cultural influences on the unconsciousness. This work involves utilizing cutting-edge neurotechnology to study how cultural context shapes the study and how cultural context shapes the neural mechanisms underlying perception, self-awareness, and emotional experience. By examining how cultural practices, beliefs, and language do impact the brain activity, we aim to develop a deeper understanding of how consciousness is not just a biological phenomenon, but also a socially and culturally mediated experience. When we study the ancient belief systems throughout the known history of the world and humanity, and the religions of the world which the people form all around the world, east to west, believed in the conscious existences with these belief systems, and a body of awareness and consciousness, the soul and intelligence. What are we to understand? That's a good question. Especially when we break it down into current methods of study and scientific scrutiny. Does the human consciousness exist as it did before and will exist later after the physicality of the human being is no more? More we discover about the intelligent consciousness, more intrigued we become, because there are so many unknowns. When we question the subject in these terms, such as, if the consciousness is not a byproduct of the physical realm within the body, as our deliberations of AI and research into robotics, we seem to begin to understand that the human consciousness can be totally different and separate from the physicality we currently tend to understand. What stops consciousness to exist elsewhere, external to the physical body, when it comes to intelligent consciousness that can be incorporated or even programmed in an AI system? The question remains as to why it is at all important to have a human physicality in the world. Are we progressing towards that sort of a future consciousness that is intelligent and is not of machine consciousness existing in the man-made machinery, the robotics? The question remains, is it possible to communicate with that consciousness existing elsewhere, even outside the human physicality? Through techniques such as neuroimaging and electrophysiology, we can observe how the brain responds to culturally specific stimuli, such as language, imagery, or social interactions. These studies have the potential to unlock new insights into the nature of consciousness, revealing how the brain's neural networks are shaped by cultural factors in ways that were previously unexplored. As it was previously declared, cultural context posits a fundamental role in shaping human consciousness, influencing how individuals perceive themselves, experience emotions, and engage with the world. From the development of self-concept to the practice of cultural rituals that induce altered states of awareness, culture and consciousness are deeply entwined. Therefore, the researchers and scientists are committed to advancing the understanding of how new neural or neurobiology and culture interact, using cutting-edge neurotechnological tools to explore the complex relationship between the brain and cultural forces which shape the human experience. By integrating the insights from neuroscience and cultural studies, we aim to foster a more holistic approach to understanding consciousness, the ones that recognize the profound impact of cultural context and the way we experience the world and ourselves. As the author indicates, we can describe human consciousness as in the sense of self-awareness and personal identity. Perhaps it still is the most intriguing mystery in the universe. It really is the feeling of being alive and experiencing the world around us. Consciousness makes us capable of experiencing the aroma of a flower, a rose perhaps, the touch of breeze, the water, the taste of food, the sound of music, and the sight of sunrise or sunset. We all have this unique ability to be aware of our thoughts, emotions, memories, and even our own awareness. Despite this centrality of consciousness to our human experience, it remains shrouded in mystery. Science has no definitive explanation of what consciousness is, how it occurs, or why it exists at all. It sits at the intersection of philosophy, psychology, neurosciences, cognitive science, and even quantum physics, each attempting to unwrap layers of this profound mystery. Neuroscientific perspectives. Let's consider. In the realm of neuroscience, the consciousness has often been studied as an emergent property of the brain. Research explores the neural correlation of consciousness, aiming to identify specific neural systems or patterns of brain activity that correspond to conscious experiences. The study of brain injuries and disorders has provided significant insights into the neural basis of consciousness. For instance, damage to the reticular activating system in the brain stem can lead to a state of coma, unconsciousness, indicating that this region's critical role in maintaining consciousness. A groundbreaking theory in neuroscience is the integrated information theory, proposed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi. This theory proposes that consciousness arises from the brain's ability to integrate information. Essentially, a conscious system must have a high degree of both differentiation, remember each moment of consciousness is unique, and integration, consciousness is unified and indivisible. While neuroscience has made strides in understanding the mechanisms that might underpin consciousness, it does not answer the question, why and how does a physical system like the brain produce conscious experience? Let's call it an unsolved enigma. The concept of consciousness has been an integral part of philosophical discourse since ancient times. The Greeks, led by philosophers such as Aristotle and Plato, presented some of the earliest systematic treatments of consciousness. They examined the human capacity for knowledge, self-awareness, and introspection. Aristotle, for example, introduced the concept of the psyche, the first entelechy, or functional realization of the body, taken to what we now understand as consciousness. Plato's allegory of the cave touched upon the dichotomy between perception and reality, or the subjective nature of our conscious experience. As the centuries rolled on, philosophical inquiries into consciousness evolved with the advent of new schools of thought. Descartes' cogito, I think, therefore I am, during the Renaissance, exemplified a shift to a more subjective understanding of consciousness. He asserted the inability of this, or his conscious experience, as the foundation of his existence, as a standpoint that would be integral to the later development of phenomenology. The Enlightenment era, and so the empiricists like David Hume delved into the notions of the self and personal identity, is described as nothing more than a bundle of perceptions or experiences held together by the psychologically related to causation. In the 19th and 20th centuries, with the advent of psychology as a scientific discipline, consciousness was explored from diverse perspectives. The psychoanalytic theories of Freud, emphasizing the role of the unconscious, reshaped the understanding of the mind. The phenomenological tradition led by Edmund Husserl, and later elaborated by philosophers like Heidegger and Sartre, emphasized the first-person exploration of consciousness as experienced in its subjective richness. In our contemporary era, philosophers like David Chalmers have grappled with the extremely hard problem of consciousness, trying to explain why physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experiences. Today's philosophers and scientists continue to wrestle with the age-old question, breaking into the go-between the objective world and our subjective experiences. Thus, from the ancient Greeks to contemporary thinkers, the philosophical exploration of consciousness continues to evolve, shedding light within the study of human existence and our understanding of reality. Can machines attain consciousness? Good question. The artificial intelligence, or AI, has revolutionized our understanding of cognition and brought to the forefront of crucial question: can machines achieve a level of consciousness to human beings? Human consciousness, a profound enigma in itself, is a multidimensional phenomenon, characterized not just by awareness of the external world, but also by self-awareness, introspection, emotions, and an embodied sense of being. It is both subjective and deeply personal. And despite significant progress in neuroscience, its exact nature and origins remain elusive. Artificial intelligence currently operates within the realm of functional consciousness. That is, AI systems can process the amount of information, learn from the start, make predictions, and carry out tasks with increasing sophistication. Yet, this impressive functionality does not equate to a subjective, first-person experience of the world. What philosopher Thomas Nagel refers to as what it is like to be a certain entity. The current state of the art AI understanding of information lacks phenomenological aspect of consciousness. These systems do not possess personal experiences or emotions, nor do they have a concept of self. AI does not experience joy when it beats a human at a chess game, nor does it feel disappointment when it loses. It merely follows the programmed protocols, learning and improving based on objective patterns and correlations in the data. This is not to say that the future of AI is confined to its current capabilities. As AI technology advances, we are continually pushing the boundaries of what machines can do. Concepts like artificial general intelligence, or AGI, systems that can perform any intellectual task that a human can, are not only being discussed, but fervently pursued. As we strive towards this future, the prospect of machines attaining a form of consciousness becomes an increasingly valid question. Could a sufficiently advanced AI develop self-awareness? Could it come to experience the world in a subjective way, akin to human consciousness? And if so, what would this imply about? Particularly, the nature of consciousness itself. Is consciousness a biological phenomenon, or could it emerge in the non-biological entities, given sufficient complexity? This question sits at the intersection of AI research, philosophy of mind, cognitive sciences, and ethics, stimulating a dialogue that is as exciting as it is essential. The possibility of machine consciousness challenges the understanding of not just artificial intelligence, but human intelligence and consciousness itself. As we continue to unlock the secrets of our own minds and simultaneously develop increasingly sophisticated AI, we find ourselves on the cusp of potentially redefining what it means to be conscious. The journey to understanding consciousness, both human and potentially artificial, promises to be one of the most thrilling quests of our time. With that, we will end this episode till we meet you again here. Keep smiling and be happy. Thank you.